Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nothing But Nugs podcast, part of the Elevated Pulse Sports family of podcasts by the fans, for the fans, diehards only. You probably missed us last week. We hope you did at least. But Eric was out of town having fun. And so when that happens in the summertime, there's just not much we can do about it. We just kind of let him have fun. We give me an off evening, and we let you guys go back and hopefully binge on some of our older episodes. But speaking of which, I have Eric here with me today. Obviously, he's back. Eric, how are we doing? How was your trip?
Trip was great. Spent a little bit of time on the East Coast, and what a time to be on the East Coast. I can tell you firsthand, the excitement was through the roof. The closer you got to New York, we do have an NBA champion for the first time in 53 years in New York City. So, yeah, that was exciting. A lot of fun, but it brought back a lot of memories from when the Nuggets were able to bring home a championship. So hopefully that's where we can get back to.
Yeah, hopefully so, man. That was quite the finals. I mean, 5 games doesn't really do justice to the way that series ended up shaking out. You had a nice up-and-coming, young, athletic, deep Spurs team against a Knicks team that I was kind of surprised only really had they had a phenomenal starting lineup. And then their bench was like Mitchell Robinson and then 3 guards. I was like, what is this rotation? What's going on here? But I guess honestly, to kick off today's episode, let's just talk about that real quick. What were just some of your general takeaways from that NBA Finals? Ed, I don't know how much of it you got to watch, but
I watched it all. The Spurs, their time is coming. I don't think there's any question about the fact that Wemby is if not already, he's a future face of the league. He has really separated himself from a defensive standpoint from everybody else in the field. But look, I think in the NBA, to win the championship, you first have to. It just seems like you first have to suffer that heartbreak, that loss. You have to know what that feels like. And we kind of all thought that might happen against OKC in the in the Western Conference Championship, and it didn't. And they were able to get to the finals, but I think they experienced it. The West is going to be a tough road for the years to come. The Spurs looked awfully tough, but man, what a resilient bunch in New York. Every time you turned it on in the first quarter, it seemed like they were down 15 points. And I think I saw a stat that said that the Spurs led for like 74% of the finals. That's pretty crazy to think that they, were basically in command of every game and ultimately ended up being on the losing end in 4 out of the 5. I think, look, I'm not like, I talked a little bit on one of the podcasts. I do like the Knicks. I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm not like some super fan of the Knicks or anything like that. But until I'm proven differently, I guess Jalen Brunson's got to be, at least top 3, but probably the greatest Knick of all time, at least right now, with just the way he was able to perform and close out the finals. I mean, Game 5, what an unbelievable game! 45 points, essentially half of the points for his entire team. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen something like that, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal point, honestly. I mean, you need your best players to step up when they absolutely have to. You didn't really see him have the most efficient output in some of those earlier games. But what's the saying that came out of this finals? Everyone's better than Jalen Brunson until it's time to be better than Jalen Brunson. Yeah. So, absolutely phenomenal performance for him when it mattered most. What you really saw in that series was a team in its prime in the New York Knicks against a team with a very bright future, but in their early 20s, essentially, in the San Antonio Spurs. And I'm glad you also brought up the aspect of the heartbreak there too, because we saw that with Oklahoma City also, right? They made the play-in that one year. I think they lost the play-in to like the Timberwolves or something like that. And then a few years later, they just march right on through to the NBA Finals and win the whole thing. So, it's hard to avoid that as a team. We thought the Spurs might have had a good chance to avoid that seemingly necessary, punch in the gut type of experience. But, it just happens to be the case that no one can avoid it. So, Yeah, tough loss for them, especially. We were really excited for Wemby. Wemby was, I mean, he's just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. But I mean, all things considered, Spurs are set up nicely. They've got good depth. It'll be interesting to see what they do with De'Aaron Fox this offseason. But otherwise, I mean, Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, and then Wembanyama, they've got a really solid future ahead of them for sure. That's going to cause our Nuggets some issues. But before we get into our Nuggets today, obviously, if you've read the title of this episode, it's draft preview day. The draft, believe it or not, is less than a week away. We're at that point in the summer, and there's been a lot of talk about a lot of different things that the Nuggets could potentially be doing in this year's draft. Obviously, they have a lot of needs, a lot of things to address. Before we get into that, though, obviously, this is a bit of a smaller news story that broke over the last 2 weeks that we haven't been here with you guys. But, I mean, Chris Marlowe and Scott Hastings, the voice of Nuggets television for over 2 decades, right? I think at least one of them started in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken.
No, yeah, you're spot on. I mean, Scott Hastings, I mean, as soon as he retired from being a player, he jumped right in. He was doing Broncos and Nuggets games back as far as 1993. And then, you know, Chris Marlowe's really been the only play-by-play color guy since Altitude was brought on the air. I mean, 22 seasons, I think 21 of them, they were together kind of as a duo. So, yeah, I mean, look, things are changing. You know, there's probably going to be some other things that change along with this Denver Nugget team. It'll be interesting to see who they get to, you know, call the games. You know, I think they have some people who are kind of waiting in the wings. I think Katie Winge might be a name that we see, but I really don't know. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be different for Nuggets fans. We're going to have a completely different sound and feel for the team next year when we're all watching on Altitude.
Yeah, mighty sad day, at least for some of us. I mean, obviously, I'm not sure if Chris Marlowe is still going to be doing the Olympics next time the Olympics come around. It's also fun to listen to him do some commentary on like volleyball and stuff. But I mean, as someone who's been watching Altitude probably since the early 2010s, I really loved listening to Marlowe and Hastings on television. They were just phenomenal. It was cool to just see the team grow with them and watch their experience of a team that went from being a playoff team to, you know, kind of really quite bad, you know, for a few years in there. Kind of just rebuild everything and then build into the Jokic, Murray era of Nuggets basketball. And to have them there at every step of the way on the broadcast was just really fun. It was really fun. But, you know, all good things must come to an end. So,
that's right.
You know, it's kind of unfortunate that they were let go. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Hastings is still going to be doing radio. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as I understand, I mean, I think he's still on the radio, but so you can still hear him from there. And look, I loved him simply because he was a homer. Like that was the best part of Scott Hastings was the fact that he didn't care. He was going to tell it as it was as a Denver Nugget fan through the Denver Nugget eye. And that's what, I mean, I think that's what a lot of fans liked with Scott Hastings. If there was a bad call and it went against the Nuggets, he would be the first one to say that was a terrible call. So I think that's kind of what we all loved him for. He would tell the corny jokes, you know, in the post-game interview when he would tell the guys he would buy them dinner on the plane and those types of things. You know, he was just very well liked in the clubhouse. And so it is definitely a sad time to see him go, but glad we're still able to hear him on the airwaves here in Denver.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see who the new team is, but they'll probably do a pretty good job, I assume. I don't think Katie's doing play-by-play. I bet Katie is probably up there in the list of people who's going to be doing color going forward. It'll be interesting to see who the new play-by-play person is. Hopefully it's someone who's younger and can be with this team for the next 20, 25 years like Marlowe was, you know? So interesting stuff. But yeah, we figured we'd note that, obviously, as Denver Nuggets diehards. We notice these things. We appreciate the commentators who we're watching on a regular basis. So shout out to Chris, shout out to Scott, shout out to Chris Dempsey too. I know we kind of missed him, but he's also not coming back to Altitude Sports. Unfortunate, but yeah, it's just tough that that's the way that went down. But that aside, I think it's time to move into some more exciting stuff, more anticipatory stuff. Like I said, the draft is coming up quick. And I mean, there's been just so much news over the last week that we could just dive right on into. But I'm kind of curious your thoughts on this. So obviously, the Nuggets, as it stands, have the 26th overall pick in the first round. I'm personally not planning to do much talking about the second round. I really don't know some of those prospects who are going to fall that far. And so I know the Nuggets have a late 40s second round pick. Is that correct?
Yeah, 46, I think, something 49, I think 49.
Yeah, something like that. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to talk too much about that. The first round will be very, very interesting, though, because as I'm sure many of us have seen on social media, there's just so many different trade packages, different scenarios where you could see someone like a Christian Brown or a Cam Johnson being sent out and a first round pick being a part of that deal, whether it be to try and get someone to take Christian Brown's contract, which is a really bad contract, or maybe send someone like a Cameron Johnson and someone else like a Zeke Naji who has like $8 million on his contract away, but throwing in that first round pick to make that type of a deal more reasonable, so to speak. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, at the outset, do you want the Nuggets to get rid of their first round pick prior to the draft or at some point on draft night to the point where they don't have a first round pick at all? Is that something you'd be in favor of or no?
I go back and forth on this because look, I do think that the Nuggets in certain positions, they need to get younger and they need to have talent. And first round talent, this draft is absolutely loaded. And there are some really, really good players that you can get at that 26th pick. I'm excited for a couple of the players that could potentially fall to the Nuggets at that spot. So look, I agree. Maybe if we're able to move away from a Christian Brown contract, or maybe if it's the right piece coming back to us. But look, I've said this in previous shows. I don't really want to trade a first round draft pick to anybody in the Western Conference. I just don't. I don't need to see a guy, come back and haunt us because we traded away a first round draft pick. That's just not what I want to see. So if we can move somebody to the Eastern Conference, maybe I would be okay with it. But I think for the most part, this draft is just so deep and so talented that I would like to see us hold on to that pick and make a pick.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. At a minimum, I think I would like the Nuggets to have a pick in the first round of the draft, whether that be at 26. There's been some speculation or some news that the Nuggets might try to trade up with one of the teams in like the teens who has multiple picks in this first round. Among those teams, I think there are 4. Maybe there's more than 4, but the ones that come to mind initially are Oklahoma City, Charlotte, the Grizzlies, and there's one more team. There's one more team that has 2 picks in the first round. Oh, the Spurs. The Spurs also have 2 picks in the first round. So, I mean, there are 3 Western Conference teams there, but if there's an opportunity to move up in the draft, is that something you would want the Nuggets to consider with any of those 4 teams, given that those 4 teams are probably the most likely to try to move off of maybe one of those picks to get maybe an upgrade positionally somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, the team that I kind of highlight is probably Memphis, or maybe even OKC. I really hate to do deals with OKC just because Sam Presti is a phenomenal general manager, and I just feel like with some guys, they just always get the better end of a trade. So he's probably one I don't want to trade with. But I feel like the Hornets are a prime spot. The Grizzlies are kind of a prime spot. If you could land somewhere in that 14 to 16 range, and move off of a Christian Brown contract, I think that's definitely something the Nuggets should consider. Or if it's a Cam Johnson you're moving away, whatever that deal might be, I think those are certainly things that should be on the table, and they should be looking at. Now, I will say, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the draft is Tuesday. So I think if there's going to be a trade that's made, it's probably likely to happen over this weekend, because I think that with all the other things that are happening in the NBA and with all how deep and talented this draft is, I really think you kind of want to know before that draft starts where you're picking and who's, they have eyes on guys, I'm sure, and they really want to kind of hone in on who their pick is going to be. It's not to say something couldn't happen on draft day, of course, but I think, around the NBA, not just the Nuggets, around the NBA, I think this weekend is going to be a busy weekend.
Yeah, some pre-draft trades might get done. You always love to see those. As for those 4 teams, let's just talk about Charlotte, right? Because they're the one team that we'd both be okay with, relatively speaking, making a trade with the Denver Nuggets in the first round. They have picks 14 and 18. Now, with that type of a deal, I mean, I doubt that they need another guard. Right, they seem pretty solid with guards. I think they even selected a guard in last year's draft. So getting rid of Christian Brown in a trade with the Charlotte Hornets doesn't seem terribly likely. That would probably be more so a Cam Johnson type of trade. And Denver Nuggets on Sports Illustrated made this potential recommendation. Some type of deal like this. What would you think about a deal like this? The Nuggets swap Cameron Johnson and the 26th overall pick with Charlotte for the 18th overall pick and Grant Williams. What would that type of deal in your mind do for this team? Is that something you like, something you don't?
I mean, I don't know Grant Williams' contract situation off the top of my head. I would assume he probably has more than just the 1 year left, which I know that's what Cam Johnson has, is just 1 year left. But Grant Williams is a guy who has shown that he can play in the NBA. He's kind of a versatile big. He can play a couple of different positions. And he's been on winning teams before. So I think he knows what it takes to win in the NBA. You also kind of move up from, you move up to, what'd you say, the 18th pick? Yeah. So I think that, that anytime you can get closer, because look, there are guys, like what the lottery is the top 14. There are guys that are just right there on the border of lottery or not lottery, but they're still guys that can push a team like the Nuggets, maybe push them, to over the edge, I would say, like push them a little further. When you get some new talent in, that could make or break a season. Because look, the Nuggets are in in my opinion, they're in win now mode. They're not. This draft should not be spent trying to find a developmental piece. You've got to find a guy who can come in, probably going to be off the bench, which totally fine with, but come in off the bench and be a contributor, not just be a guy that comes in and, gets 6 to 10 minutes. We need a guy who's going to come in and make an impact. And I think the closer you get to that kind of fringe of being on the lottery edge, you're more likely to find one of those types of guys.
Yeah, this is very valid. As far as Grant Williams' contract situation, he has 1 year left on his deal, and it's for $9 million cheaper than Cam Johnson. Now, I'm not sure that Grant Williams would slot in as your starting 3. I think you'd still want to try to do something about that in free agency. Obviously, we'd like to get some depth at the forward spots in the drafts too. But Grant Williams would be a really solid bench piece. In about 20 minutes per game with Charlotte last year in 36 games played, granted, no pun intended, by the way, granted. The average 7 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 39% from 3 on about 4 attempts per game. Half a steal, half a block, 5.6 plus minus. And here's actually the most intriguing thing about this type of deal, or for this type of guy. In 2025, 2026, his defensive rating was 106.3. Yeah. And so for a Nuggets team that needs a guy who's 6'7", kind of a solid wing defender, can guard 2 through 3, maybe 4, a little bit. I mean, I like that deal. You lose $9 million, free up some cap space. You get a higher pick in the first round. And you add a solid 3-and-D defender and player just overall to your team, which is something I have been talking about for the longest period of time. Those are the guys the Nuggets need around Nikola Jokic. And so that is the type of trade that I would personally love to see the Nuggets make, whether it be on draft night or before draft night. But I mean, that's just my personal take on that. As far as, I mean, some of these other trade situations, you don't really want to deal with the Thunder. I agree with you on that. The Thunder have picks 12 and 17. The team in the Western Conference Finals in 2025, 2026 has two picks in the top 20 in the next year's draft. Absolutely insane, the work that Sam Presti's done. But yeah, I don't really see the Nuggets trying to do a deal with them. I mean, the Spurs, same type of deal. Are you really going to, as the Nuggets, as the third seed in the West last year, are you really going to give one of your players to one of the two teams that you're competing with for, competitive rank in the Western Conference? I highly doubt that. And as far as the Grizzlies are concerned, I'm not sure what their picks are in the first round, but can it really be that much more valuable than a type of deal that we just discussed? I highly doubt it. So as far as pre-draft or during draft night trades that involve the Nuggets having a first round pick and moving off of someone like a Cam Johnson, I think that's a great deal. I'd take that 100% of the time. But let's start moving into some other prospects now. So we're assuming the Nuggets don't trade their first round pick and have 0 first round picks. We're going to assume that the Nuggets have a first round pick at some point in the 2026-2027 NBA draft. And so that said, CBS released an updated 2026 NBA mock draft earlier this afternoon that I kind of found pretty intriguing. So I think let's just walk through this. And as we kind of walk through this just generally, maybe we won't take as much time talking about some of the guys earlier on in the draft. But once we get to those teens, and maybe we'll start talking about some of these guys that might be worth trading up for if you're the Denver Nuggets trying to move up. And maybe we'll even play out some scenarios where the Nuggets don't trade up and who might be available for them at 26. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Word. Yeah, let's get right on into it. So as far as this mock draft goes, obviously, number 1 overall pick for the Washington Wizards is AJ Debonsa in this mock draft. That makes sense. The Nuggets don't really have an opportunity to get a guy like that. And it's good for the Wizards, right? The Wizards are really needing to start their rebuild process, and they have a lot of different areas that they need to improve on. This is the guy that is probably going to go number 1 overall. As far as at number 2, Darren Peterson, something very similar. 6'5" guards who have the type of skill set that Peterson has on the Utah Jazz is not something I personally, as a Nuggets fan, want to see in 2026, 2027. But I mean, the Jazz are right there. The Jazz honestly could be a sneaky contender.
The Jazz are a sneaky good team. They have really good pieces, and I'm not a huge Darren Peterson fan. But look, he is a dynamic player when he wants to be. I think that's kind of what he showed at Kansas. But yeah, man, Utah, that's what makes the West so scary. You've got teams like Utah who weren't obviously in the playoff position last year. That they could be like a year away, and then boom, they're right there competing, with the likes of the Nuggets for a top 5 seed. I think Portland is very similar, where they looked pretty good in the playoffs. A couple of pieces here or there, and boom, they could be one of those teams. So, and it's just the West is so deep, and so when you saw, I think Oklahoma City pretty much kind of put that Western Conference in their back pocket. It was clearly them and San Antonio. They were 1 and 2. They were heads and shoulders above everybody else. But between 3 and 10, I think it was only like 3 or 4 games that separated that entire pack, and maybe a little bit more. But the West is really deep, and it only takes a few games here or there, and you're talking major changes in the standings.
Yeah. And for a team like Utah, now you're starting to see, what is this, year 3 or year 4 for a guy like Keontae George, Walker Kessler, some of their core young guys, they're starting to edge right up on that age where, like we saw with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, where these guys start to take the next step because they now understand how the game works, and they're starting to see their roles a lot more clearly. So adding a guy like Darren Peterson, I mean, that's a pretty scary Jazz team probably in the next few seasons. And so, not a good situation for the Nuggets to be in at that point. Now, another guy, round one, the third pick, Cameron Boozer. I guess there's been some debate, maybe, whether the Jazz might take Cameron Boozer. I mean, Cameron Boozer is a really solid overall player. But I mean, the Jazz just have so much front court depth that adding another forward really doesn't make much sense for them. But I mean, he's going to go to the Grizzlies probably with that third overall pick. One of the two that the Grizzlies have in the first round. So, I mean, that's not terribly surprising, is it? Right.
No, I mean, I think it's kind of a toss up between him and Peterson. I do think you're probably right. They don't strike me as needing a ton, more front court help. But I think what Boozer has is Boozer, to me, anyways, he probably has a lower ceiling but a higher floor, if that makes sense, than Peterson, because Peterson was kind of erratic at Kansas, just from the standpoint of his playing time, his availability. So I don't know, that might scare teams off, but probably not when you're just looking at that much talent. His ceiling, I feel, is extremely high, comparatively speaking, to where Boozer sits.
Yeah, I mean, I probably agree with you, honestly. Watching back over some Cameron Boozer highlights, I kind of drew the same type of conclusion. I was like, this is a really solid dude, but I don't really feel like this dude has the same type of ceiling, at least. That's not to say he can't be good, but I mean, a 6'5" guard who can do an awful lot, pretty much everything on the basketball court is really hard to find. And so, I mean, for that reason, yeah, you almost really do have to say that a guy like Darren Peterson has the slightly higher upside in theory. Again, on paper, just looking generally at who they are as a player. But I mean, on Memphis, we'll see what Cam gets the opportunity to do. He'll get a chance to do some cooking, well, one would presume, for a pretty poor Grizzlies team. Yeah. Round one, pick 4. This draft has Caleb Wilson going to the Chicago Bulls. Caleb Wilson, man, I mean, that's an athlete. That's not going to be a guy who's going to shoot incredibly well. I mean, mid-range, maybe, but that guy is not a guy you want to try to drive on. So, I mean, any thoughts about that pick?
I mean, honestly, I think the pick is great. I think if we're just going to call it out, I think Caleb Wilson is a guy Mike Malone really wished he could have had stay in North Carolina another year. So he could get an opportunity to coach him, because I think he's going to be a phenomenal player in the NBA. Maybe not immediate giant impact, but I think he's going to grow into becoming a really good player.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's a nice piece for a Chicago Bulls team that is kind of young and up and coming. I mean, they made a crud ton of moves at the deadline to reshuffle their entire roster. So, I mean, adding a guy like this to the fold, especially since they have so many guards and smaller guys, it's a good situation for them, all things considered. Round one, pick 5, they have the Clippers taking Keaton Wagler. Okay, now I watched back over some Keaton Wagler highlights. The first thought that came into my mind, it felt like I was just watching Jamal Murray. I'm not even going to lie. Their play style is so similar. I actually encourage people to go watch back over his highlights. I'm not the largest college basketball fan, so maybe people are familiar with his game more than I am, significantly. But I mean, I was watching his highlights again. I was like, that guy, it's just Jamal Murray. But I mean, what do you know? What do you know about Keaton Wagler? Do you think that's a good move for the Clippers?
I mean, he was a stud at Illinois. That's what I know about Keaton Wagler. I didn't watch a ton of Illinois games, but what I was able to see of him, you took the words right out of my mouth. He's Jamal Murray 2.0. He just the way he handles the ball, his ability to shoot the ball from deep. He can be streaky at times, but overall, the guy was a stud. He led Illinois in the NCAA tournament as a freshman. So I think that's a good pick. I hate to tip my cap to the Clippers. I don't want them getting better, but I think that'd be a good pick for them.
Yeah, that'd be a very interesting point guard situation for them also going into 2027 because they got Darius Garland at
Yeah.
the trade deadline last year for James Harden. So interesting backcourt situation for the Clippers. But yeah, I think that's a pretty solid pick overall. I mean, 40% from three as a freshman is really kind of crazy. So yeah, solid pick at number 5. Round 1, pick 6, we have the Brooklyn Nets, and CBS has them taking Darius Acuff Jr. In that pick. I mean, 6'2" guard, kind of interesting player overall. I mean, 44% from three is really impressive, but I mean, size might be a tad bit of a concern. I mean, athleticism also is a concern that some scouts have had about him. But any other thoughts about Darius Acuff Jr.? It is to the Brooklyn Nets, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, he Acuff was one of the more exciting players to watch last March during March Madness. I really liked watching him play. Now, does that mean it's going to translate to the NBA? I don't know. Does it always? No, certainly not. But he seemed like a finisher. He obviously could shoot the ball well, 44% from three, scored 23 and a half a night while at Arkansas. So look, I mean, he was kind of that microwave type of scorer. He could, whenever he heated up, he really got going. So that could be a good play for Brooklyn. But look, Brooklyn seems to be kind of that. It's almost funny because of the proximity, but they're like the New York Jets of the NBA. I hate to say it, but right now there's not many Brooklyn Nets fans in the tri-state area. It's all Knicks right now. So maybe they can sneak something under the radar. Who knows? But Acuff is a good player.
Yeah. Overall, hard to complain about that at that spot. He had 49 points against Alabama. That was the highlight of his season, just to the point that you were making. So, I mean, to have a guy like him on a team with Michael Porter Jr., I mean, those are two guys who can just light it up every once in a while. I mean, Michael Porter Jr. had a pretty solid season overall, but like, it's just, they're those types of guys who at each of their levels have demonstrated, yeah, I can go for like 40 at one evening just randomly. So yeah, interesting situation that Brooklyn might find themselves in after making that selection. Round 1, pick 7, we have Michael Brown Jr. going to the Sacramento Kings. He's a point guard, 34% from three, 18 points per game. I mean, he's a very complete player. That's the one thing that I noted when I was watching back over some of his highlights. He's a 3-level scorer. And pretty solid in every sense of the word. I mean, you think about a guy like Damian Lillard. I think that's a comparison that some people made for him. It feels like that is the case. So, any thoughts on Michael Brown Jr.?
I didn't see a whole lot of him. I didn't watch Louisville very closely last year, but look, a complete player. It's the Kings need a lot of pieces. So if they want to start at point guard with their process of kind of building, I'm not going to argue with them. I don't think he's going to be a guy who's going to come in and light the league on fire. But really, at a point guard position, what do you need? You need consistency. You need somebody who you can count on, and he seems to be that kind of player.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll agree with that sentiment. Round 1, pick number 8, we have the Hawks. The Hawks, I think, also have 2 first-round picks. They're the other team I was thinking of. At this pick, CBS has them taking Kingston Flemings, point guard. He's 6'3". I watched his highlights a little bit earlier today. I was like, this guy is really pretty impressive, all things considered. I mean, yeah, very, very interesting player. I mean, Houston's a pretty solid team overall, but it's 39% from three, 16 points per game, 5 assists per game. Any thoughts about Flemings?
A super athletic guy. I think that he's somebody that can come into Atlanta and be a piece that kind of fits. And I'm sure he would be able to come in and make an impact on their team. Look, Atlanta is another one of those teams. I know they're in the East, but they were another one of those teams that they're not far off. They have some really nice pieces. And Atlanta was one of those teams where, if we could, I'm glad you mentioned that they have 2 first-round picks. If we could work a deal with Atlanta, there's some nice pieces that I would be consider if the deal was the right deal. But look, I think he's a great pick. I saw some arguments there back and forth on do they go somebody like a big, or do they look at more of a guard type guard role? He's obviously a point guard, so I think this could be a great fit for Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is just a dude who knows how to get to a spot and score. So,
Yeah.
I mean, now they have Nikhil Alexander Walker on that team too, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, Dyson Daniels, as far as I know, never been a really consistent shooter, and so to have a guy who can create shots at one of your guard spots is super valuable. So I can totally understand the decision to draft a guy like that at that pick. Round one, pick number 9, Braden Burries. Another very similar type of thought from me. He'd be going to the Dallas Mavericks at this pick. He's a shooting guard, 6'4", 39% from three. Here's another just dude who's super tough, super well built for a modern 2-guard type of position. He can create shots. Thoughts about Braden Burries?
Him and Kingston Flemings are like one and the same. They're very similar game style or style of gameplay. Really similar height, weight. He's maybe a tad better at shooting percentage, from deep. But look, this class is loaded with talented freshmen, and that's the thing that you're at this point in the draft. The last, I think, 2 or 3 guys that we've talked about have all been freshmen. And it's like, that's kind of where you start to say, well, how much of an impact are they really going to be able to make? Because you're talking about guys who are probably 18, maybe turning 19. Are they going to come in and be able to make a huge difference? Now, obviously, Cooper Flagg did, but I don't think these guys you're not talking Cooper Flagg type of talent. So, but again, you start looking at building, you got Cooper Flagg in place in Dallas. He's a great centerpiece to kind of build around. They've got, the bigs. It seems like they have a couple of pieces there. So maybe adding a point guard to somebody who can bring the ball up to back up Kyrie Irving, I think is probably a smart choice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it never hurts to have another big guard who can shoot the basketball and shot create, right? So, especially with Kyrie Irving having injury issues historically and kind of just getting up there in age. So, yeah, for sure. Solid. I agree with that. Round 1, pick 10. This is the Milwaukee Bucks taking Nate Ament, 6'10". This is a guy who's another freshman, another forward. Now that we're seeing, he's not a guy who's gonna light it up from 3, but I mean, really solid finisher in the paint. Solid enough defensively. Any thoughts about Nate Ament, especially if the Milwaukee Bucks decide to make a Giannis trade at some point this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the key, right? Because I do think Giannis is probably on his way out. At least that's everything kind of points to that. But we've all seen that in the past with Giannis too, where he ultimately didn't end up going anywhere. But I think I'll put it this way: if Giannis were to stay, then Nate Ament finds a perfect place to sit and learn from one of the better bigs that we've seen in this league in a long time. If Giannis leaves and he's kind of thrust into having to deal with maybe more than what he should be able to or should have to take on, then I don't know that everything works out. He is kind of that risk reward type of player. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens with Giannis and if that falls into place for Nate Ament.
Yeah, I guess we will. There's some also speculation that Brooklyn might try to snag him with their first overall pick in what was that? Did we say it was 6 overall? So, I mean, Brooklyn is another one of those teams that's just trying to add depth. Maybe they snag him, but at a minimum, yeah, if they don't make a Giannis trade, then the Bucks would be a great place for a guy like this to go and just learn and come off the bench and become a solid NBA player on. Solid situation for him. Round 1, pick 11. We have Adi Mara, something like that. He's a center. They have him going to Golden State. He's 7'3", 260, played for Michigan. And now I watched his highlights back again. And I thought, Keaton Wagler was very Jamal Murray-like. I thought Adai Mara had the Nikola Jokic spin package and post-up package pretty much locked down, with the ability to dunk and be a rim threat off of lobs and such. But any thoughts about that move? I actually really like that move for Golden State.
I think that's one of the best picks so far. Selfishly, I found myself kind of cheering for Michigan as the tournament went on. I just liked the way they played together as a team. And there were two guys on their team who I really fell in love with, and Mara was one of them. I could really see him playing very well with the Nuggets, and that was kind of my initial thought was, if maybe he needs to stop playing so well in the tournament so the Nuggets can have a chance to draft him. But ultimately, I don't think that it worked out that way. But I think this would be a great pick, for Golden State. They definitely are a team that's gotten older. They have the need for they have a lot of needs, I think, a lot of positional needs. But look, this is a guy who can come in, I think, pretty much right away. He's going to hold his own on defense just because of his size and his ability to finish at the rim with not to your point. I mean, he obviously is going to be a dunker, but he had a nice touch when he was at Michigan. So doesn't shoot the ball from three terribly often. I think he was a 30% 3-point shooter, but I think that was just on limited attempts. But look, he's a guy who I could see 5 years from now kind of being like almost like a Rudy Gobert type of player, for Golden State.
Yeah, well, I mean, at that size, he's coming into the league already with an advantage defensively, even though he's not necessarily the most athletic dude. I mean, 7'3" with a solid wingspan. Did I see his wingspan here? Oh yeah, no wingspan, but 9'9" standing reach.
Yeah.
In a league where you're going to have to contend with Wemby for like the next 15 years, presumably, it would be nice to have a guy like that on your team, So especially for Golden State, as they're considering probably a rebuild at some point in the next few years with Steph coming up on retirement. Round 1, pick 12. All right, now here's where we find, I think, the first interesting guy that I've seen some people suggest that the Nuggets should maybe try to trade up for if they can. Morris Johnson Jr., also from Michigan. So back-to-back Michigan picks here. He was a sophomore, 6'9", 250, 34% from three, but really solid on the defensive end. The way CBS describes him is an enormous athletic and dirty work menace, quote unquote. So, I mean, what do we think of this type of move for the Nuggets? I think it fits part of what I'd be looking for if I was the Nuggets, but not entirely the whole thing, or as much as maybe you'd be able to get with a better type of deal or in a different position in the draft with a different player. What do you think? What do you think about Morris Johnson Jr.?
Yeah, I said I fell in love with two Michigan players, and he was the other one. I looked at him as being somebody who could, assuming the Nuggets move away from Aaron Gordon, he could be a guy who comes in and plays that Aaron Gordon type of role. Or even if they didn't move away from Aaron Gordon, he's a guy that can come in and play backup to Aaron Gordon, as Aaron Gordon kind of ages. But I love his game. I think, he's a guy who just has improved the 2 years that he was at Michigan, he improved. And then, when the season initially ended and kind of NBA mock drafts were a thing, and, I was looking at it, actually, Morris Johnson Jr. was one of the guys who was kind of in that slotted 29 range for the Nuggets. Then they had the draft, the pre-draft camps and the workouts and things like that, and he just skyrocketed. So if there was any way that we can get an opportunity to get him on the Nuggets, I think he would be a fantastic fit. So that's where I get torn, because I don't want to trade with OKC, but if it lands us a guy like Morris Johnson Jr., I might consider that.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what Oklahoma City needs, right? Is another solid dude who can play defense and to give us problems at some point in the regular season or the postseason. Yeah, I mean, this guy's defensive skill set is off the chart. I mean, he's a very solid finisher at the rim. So he definitely fits more of the defensive emphasis part of what we're looking for this offseason. But I mean, 34% from three, it is what it is. It's not terrible. He can knock him down. I really I don't know how you would play him in our specific lineup right now. I guess this comes down to philosophy, right? I think personally, one of the things I'd like to see the Nuggets do from a structural perspective this offseason is really make that offensive unit the first unit and make the defensive unit or the non-Jokic minutes unit the unit that has an emphasis more on stopping teams and being a solid lockdown defensive unit instead of being this team that can kind of balance a little bit of both and play normal basketball, right? It's hard to do when Nikola Jokic is on your team and he just does everything kind of unorthodoxly. But I mean, as far as his fit defensively, is not a bad look to have a guy like that at that size, at that position of need in that type of role. But again, you have Deron Holmes Jr. at the 3-4 type of position. I think Deron Holmes Jr. is a much better fit off the bench in what would be year 2, technically year 3 since he got drafted. And I think I'd much rather like to explore that if we're going to get significantly better 3-point shooting in a Nuggets offense that really does need to rely on drive and kick in order to succeed. So I like Morez Johnson. I wouldn't be upset about that at all. Dude is an absolute baller, especially defensively. But to move up to 12 to get that, I don't know if I would go that far. Seems like you might have to give up a decent amount of capital that the Nuggets might not even have to get him at pick 12. But I guess we'll see. Yeah, we'll find out. We might start moving a little bit more quickly through these, but stop a little bit when we find guys we like. Round 1, pick 13 is a guy I actually really like a lot. If there was one guy I think I could have the Nuggets take in this first round, I think it would be this guy. They have him going to the Miami Heat, but it's Yaxel Lendeborg. Okay. 37% from 3. He's 6'9". He's a senior, right? So he's played college basketball for a full 4 years. This feels like the type of guy that would just fit so nicely into this Nuggets team. Now, pick 13, right, might not be something the Nuggets can get up to, but what are your thoughts on the third straight Michigan player being selected in this mock draft?
Well, look, there's a reason why Michigan won the national championship. It's because they had a bunch of guys who could play. I think Yaxel is probably the most NBA-ready guy, maybe in the entire draft. I just think he's so smooth at ball handling. He plays defense pretty well. He's able to shoot. He has a great mid-range game, which probably doesn't get talked about enough. And then, he was 37% from behind the arc. Look, I watched enough of Michigan games to know he's comfortable out there. He is a guy who can, kind of create his own shot, but he also is comfortable with that, catch and shoot position. So I think Yaxel would be a tremendous fit on the Nuggets. I don't know that the Nuggets would be able to get him, at 13. That's awfully high, but whatever they could do, if there is a slide on Yaxel, if he starts to fall into that 17, 18 range, if there's a way for the Nuggets to move up and get him there, I think that's probably more likely.
Yep. I'm going to agree with you there. I don't know if it's necessarily worth the capital necessary to move up to 13 to get him, but I mean, completely agree with what you said. He's got to be one of the most NBA ready players in this specific draft. He's a really solid, complete offensive player. He can move off of cuts. He can knock down his own shot. Not too bad at shot creation, And I mean, it's just another solid body. It's an NBA ready frame at 6'9", 240 pounds for a 3-4 kind of guy. And so I love that fit for the Nuggets so much. Phenomenal fit, I think, for this team. But it'd be hard to get a guy like that. So, round 1, pick 14, Hannes Steinbach. And my wife is German, so I have to be able to say that properly. This is not a guy I really heard much about from a Nuggets perspective. I mean, he's okay, but he's even at 6'10", 248. It's a solid frame. I think the defense probably is the largest area of improvement there that needs to be had. And so for that reason, I don't really think that is a guy that the Nuggets would have their eyes on necessarily. Maybe something similar with round 1, pick 15, Cameron Carr. I mean, 6'5", again, solid height for a guard who shoots in the upper 30s from 3-point range, percentage wise, but 184. We don't really have time for a guy to put on muscle over 2-3 seasons. We need guys who can come in and fill a role immediately and be instant impact contributors. Do you have different thoughts about Cameron Carr, just briefly?
The only thing that I could say about Cameron Carr, though, his athleticism is through the roof, and he is a guy. He has to improve that 3-point shooting percentage. There's no doubt. But I think with on the right team with the right fit, he can definitely turn himself into a 3-and-D type of player. He's a little bit on the smaller side at 6'5", but his athleticism makes up for that. I saw in some of his highlights his ability to kind of condense the amount of space in between guys just from his ability to jump was something special. So I'd keep an eye out for that.
Yep. Zach LaVine, if you will, if you're looking for a comparison. Yeah, right. Round 1, pick 16. Here's the other Memphis Grizzlies pick, Christian Anderson, point guard, 6'1", 180 pounds. Now, that's a very interesting size, right? Kind of small, but I mean, dude is a shot creator, 42% from 3, and he can actually knock that down in pretty much any situation. He can shot create, he can come off of screens, etc. Very solid pick for the Grizzlies. I don't think this is the type of guy that the Nuggets need right now, even though he's a solid shot creator. We really don't need small players. We need size and athleticism and solid defensive prowess. Now, he's not terrible defensively for his size, but I mean, at the end of the day, not an ideal pick, I don't think, for the Nuggets. Round 1, pick 17 is Oklahoma City again. Now we're starting to get into the range of guys that the Nuggets might be interested in. And so I've seen some people talking about this guy. Round 1, pick 17, Dalen Swain from Texas, 6'7", 211 pounds, small forward, 34% from 3. Again, I mean, he's going to make most of his living inside the paint at the rim. Solid defender, all things considered. What do you think about Dalen Swain?
So he's one of the guys who I had kind of starred. He is definitely a guy I would love for the Nuggets to, whether he's there, when the Nuggets pick or if they have to move up, he's a guy I would definitely strongly consider. Just his ability to, 17 points a game at Texas. I think he's kind of ranked as this number 2 guy at that small forward position. Look, if we're talking about a guy, maybe having to come in and fill a Cam Johnson type of role, you want to see that 3-point percentage a little bit higher. Clearly, if you're looking at somebody for the Nuggets who's, they're going to rely on a small forward to be able to shoot the ball. But he is a guy I think who, could potentially grow into that position.
Yeah, he probably could. Now, at Xavier, before he came to Texas, he was definitely more of a defense first guy. And so we've talked about this before. The Nuggets need those types of guys on this team. At 6'7", 211 pounds, he's not going to be a 3. Right. So this is the type of guy who is probably coming off the bench to be a defensive stopper at the 2 primarily, maybe at the 3, maybe on a guy like SGA, right? If you need to give some guys a break and you need to throw a sizable guard out there to go deal with him. The jump shot is very interesting. It doesn't look the prettiest. And I mean, obviously 34% from 3 is not incredible, but all things considered, if the Nuggets really wanted to go defense first, if that was their philosophy in this draft, and this guy happens to fall farther than this, then I wouldn't have an issue with it. But I don't think I would trade up for a guy like Dalen Swain. There's just too much need for developmental work for him that the Nuggets just don't have time for. And we kind of saw this with Christian Brown, right? Very similar, generally, very similar type of player. Defense first, makes a lot of his living inside the paint, similar size. And I mean, this is going to be year 5 for Christian. He got that massive extension. He still has not developed a consistent jump shot. And so the Nuggets don't need another type of player like that on their team. I would not trade up for Dalen Swain, but if he fell to the Nuggets pick at 26, wouldn't have an issue with it. a round one, pick 18, Alan Graves. I think I heard someone briefly mention Alan Graves as a guy that the Nuggets should consider looking into. I mean, 6'8", 225, 41% from three. They have him going to the Charlotte Hornets. This is that pick 18 that the Nuggets would theoretically get in some world where that Grant Williams, Cam Johnson trade that we talked about earlier gets made. I don't think there's a ton to talk about here. I mean, I like the fact that he can shoot the three really solidly, but I mean,
the only thing that stood out to me is the kid played 23 minutes a game and threw up 12 points a game. So, that's pretty good efficiency. So that's just something to kind of keep in your back pocket. I think a lot of scouts liked him probably more than fans liked him, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty solid with steals and blocks, right, is what's noted here as well. Yeah, very interesting. It seems overall that the consensus on this guy, the thought in this mock draft is that this is a guy who's probably more of a gamble overall. Yep. And so I don't think the Nuggets should really pursue that type of avenue either. Now we start moving into the later picks. All right. We got round one, pick 19, Bennett Stearns. He's 6'3", went to Iowa. They have him going to the Raptors. Look, here's a guy, I watched his highlights. This guy has a really nice jump shot. All right. But I think he's in a very similar position that a Christian Anderson is in, where it's just like, you're a little bit too small for what the Nuggets need. All right. 6'3", 190. I mean, is this going to be your backup point guard? Is that the deal? Like, the Nuggets would really only have to draft him to fill that type of role. Right. I don't really see this being a terribly high value pick for the Nuggets, even though the skill set for the guy is really solid for some other team. Is that something you would agree with?
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, is he a guy that can probably come in and play a pretty solid backup point guard role? Absolutely. Is that what the Nuggets need? I don't think so.
Yep. I'm going to completely agree with you there. But on the Raptors, theoretically, that would be a pretty solid situation for him. Very interesting. Now we're getting into some picks. There are some guys here that I think the Nuggets should consider taking if they were to stay at 26. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on them. One of those guys is the guy who they have mocked at round one, pick 20 here to San Antonio. Yeah, the Spurs. Jaden Quaintance, center, 6'9". I think I saw somewhere say that he's about 6'10", 255. He's not a shooter at all. But let me tell you, this guy is an absolute menace defensively. Right? I mean, they say here, this guy might be one of the best, if not the best defensive prospects in the entire class at the 4-5 position. What do you think of a guy like Jaden Quaintance?
Look, my issue with Jaden Quaintance is the fact that you're going to get essentially nothing from him. I shouldn't say nothing, but it's going to be very minimal on the offensive side. So this goes back to your point earlier. If you're okay with taking a guy where you're not going to get anything, 5 points or less a night from somebody, but you need them to come in and just play a defensive stopper role, then I think, okay, that's somebody who you can look at. But I think, to me, I think the Nuggets still need to find somebody who has the ability to shoot the ball, to space the court. And I don't think that he does that. Now, whatever team he goes on, they're going to be able to stop the ball, from going in. That he plays that type of defense. But I just don't know that it's the right fit right now for the Nuggets.
Yeah, interesting. Fair enough. My thoughts on this are as such. I think it's been a while since the Nuggets have tried, if ever, even, right? If you think about, I'll start here. If you think about the backup centers that the Nuggets have had over the last 10 years, right? The top guys that come to mind are Yusuf Nurkic, Mason Plumlee, and pretty much Jonas Valanciunas. That's it. And so when you look at those three guys, I mean, do any of them really seem like they fit in one category, either offensive focused and like pretty successful at it, or defensive focused and pretty successful at it? I don't necessarily think so. I think they were just solid all around. I think you saw that mostly with Mason Plumlee, right? A guy who could roll to the rim, play pretty solid defense. We saw it a little bit with Jonas Valanciunas last year. solid offensively, burly presence inside defensively. I think that if the Nuggets were to try to commit that bench unit to being a more defensive oriented unit, and you need that guy in the middle who can really just get rebounds with other guys around him taking the shots, I think that would be a phenomenal situation for Jaden Quaintance to fit on this team within, right? I'm envisioning almost a bench unit where, I mean, point guard might still be out, but say you re-sign Bruce Brown, he's your 2. You re-sign Spencer Jones, he's your backup 3. You give Deron Holmes Jr., the second, an opportunity at the 4, and then you put Quaintance in there at the 5. I mean, Spencer and Deron would be your guys who are taking shots from the outside. Bruce Brown's kind of everywhere. And then Quaintance is just that big guy in the middle grabbing boards and playing solid defense. I mean, if that was the case, I wouldn't have many complaints, if any complaints, right? Especially at that point in the draft, right? So very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the Nuggets think about when it comes to considering drafting bigs like centers in this draft. But interesting thought as far as that's concerned. We'll start to speed through a few more of these. Round 1, pick 21, LeBaron Filan. That's not a guy I'd really heard anyone talking about going to the Nuggets. 6'3", 175 as a guard. That's probably why. He's going to the Pistons at that round, in that position in this round. Pick 22, Koa Pete. I mean, worth mentioning, I saw some people say that he might be a guy the Nuggets might or should consider at pick 26, not necessarily worth trading up for. I watched his highlights. He pretty much looks like he looks like Aaron Gordon, minus the jump shot. You know, that's not necessarily as consistent as AG has become over the years. And I'm not saying that they are very comparable, even just because they went to Arizona, both of them. But I mean, interesting. Any thoughts on Koa Pete briefly?
I mean, he comes from, you know, a lineage. So, right, his dad was a professional athlete. So anytime you're able to find people who kind of fit that model or fit that mold, you know, it's worth considering. I think he is an interesting pick. I do think that he might take a little bit more, I won't say kind of that Christian Brown role where he, you know, takes a little bit of time to grow into, but he is just a freshman. Didn't play a ton of, you know, he played pretty much pretty solid minutes at Arizona, but I don't think he was somebody who was relied on heavily, at least not in March Madness. So interesting pick. Somebody I would definitely consider, though, if he fell to us. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. By the way, I don't necessarily see him as a guy who's ready to contribute immediately. He's definitely a guy who has to refine some things at the NBA level. But I mean, he's got an NBA ready build, and in theory, that's something you could plug in. And he's pretty quick. He's a guy who can get out and run, you know, in certain situations. And so the Nuggets like to be a fast break team. It'd be cool to see this guy catching alley-oops, let's say, on a fast break. But yeah, that's pick 22 to the 76ers is where they have Koa Pete. Round 1, pick 23, Henry Visar. I'm going to just speed through that one really quickly and say no. 43% from 3 for a guy who's 6'11" is pretty impressive. But I mean, the defense, I just don't. That's just not going to be a situation here for the Nuggets. The Nuggets don't need a 3-point shooting center right now. They need a defensive center, if anything. So that he's going to the Hawks at pick 23. Pick 24, Kareem Lopez from Mexico. I didn't even actually know who this guy was until I looked at this mock draft. Probably not a guy on the Nuggets radar. He's going to the Knicks at pick 24 as a power forward. Round 1, pick 25. Now you're going to have to tell me about this. This is a guy who I think if he fell to 26, I think I would love to see the Nuggets take him. Again, thinking through that very similar lens of backup big who is out there almost purely for defense and rebounds off the bench. Terrace Reed Jr. from UConn. All right, 6'10", 265. Okay, NBA ready, NBA size, not a shooter, but 9 boards a game. And I mean, solid defensive skill set. Is that the type of guy that you could see potentially in a situation where the Nuggets decide to make the bench unit the very defensive heavy unit?
This is the center, at least for me, who I would be drooling over if I was the Nuggets, and we're just pretending we're staying at 26. We're not moving. If Terrace Reed Jr. falls to the Nuggets and they don't run immediately to the board and draft him, I don't know what they're doing. I know it was against a much smaller team, but opening round of March Madness, he had 27 rebounds and 32 points, something ridiculous. That's the kind of guy I want on my team. He plays really good defense. He's a big body, can go out there, get rebounds. He was just a beast on the offensive rebounding glass. So look, I think that's the guy for me. I know we talked a little bit about about what was his name, Quaintance. I think he's just a more refined player than Quaintance is. So he would be the guy who I would love for the Nuggets to see at draft at 26.
Yeah, for sure. That is my favorite. I saw that guy. I was like, that needs to happen. That is the guy the Nuggets need to take. If I was GM, I would try to make that happen for sure, for so many different reasons. Now to round 1, pick 26, where the Nuggets are. This mock draft has the Nuggets taking Ebuka Okori, point guard from Stanford, 6'1", 185 pounds. So he's literally my size. That does not say very much though. He's got like a 6'8" wingspan. Okay. So long arms. And I mean, dude's a pretty solid shot creator. 35% from 3 doesn't necessarily look the most incredible, but I mean, you take a look at some of the shots that the dude was creating at Stanford and you're like, oh, okay, then yeah, there's some potential there. But again, I don't need the Nuggets taking small guards. We don't need that. That's not a positional need. That's something we could patch a different way, especially since Jamal Murray already plays an awful lot of stagger in David Adelman rotations. So, I mean, backup point guard, this specific type of backup point guard, I don't think so. Would you be in a similar position?
Do we need to draft another Jalen Pickett? I'm not putting him down. I'm saying like he's a solid NBA player, but I don't think we need 2 of them on our roster.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'd agree. Okay, round 1, pick 27. Chris Sanak Jr. is going to the Celtics in this mock draft. Yeah, that's fine. Fair enough. These are guys that the Nuggets theoretically would have an opportunity to take. I don't necessarily. I mean, even though he has a 7'5" wingspan, 33% from 3. He's another one of those guys who seems like he has a lot that he's still refining with his game. It shows up on the highlights that I watched too, offensively and defensively. So the skill set's there. The Nuggets don't have time for a project, I don't think.
Agreed.
So yeah, round 1, 28, Malik Thomas from Arkansas, 6'3", 190 pounds, 42% from 3. But again, small guard. So, this is the spiel that we've already talked about multiple times in this draft. Probably a pretty promising young player, not a guy who the Nuggets need at this point in time. Now, round 1, pick 29 is about the only other guy that I think I might be interested in. Now, we've talked about a few guys who kind of fit into the more 4-5 type of role. Joshua Jefferson is projected to go here to the Cavaliers at pick 29, 6'8", 246 pounds. He's a senior, so a lot of college experience, 35% from 3, not necessarily the most athletic guy, but when watching him, I felt like I was watching a guy who could succeed in the Nuggets offense. Very much a 3-and-D type of player. He has those type of instincts, and he's another one of those type of guys like Lendelberg who feels like a very NBA-ready player, especially in a bench capacity of all capacities, right? What are your thoughts on Joshua Jefferson?
Yeah, I loved him this last season at Iowa State. It was really heartbreaking to see him get a sprained ankle 2 minutes into the opening round of March Madness. I thought Iowa State had a team that could make some noise, and they lost their best player essentially 2 minutes into the tournament. So that was kind of a bummer. But I think that was just kind of he rolled his ankle, he stepped on somebody's foot. It wasn't something that you're ultimately concerned with. Is he injury prone? It was kind of more of a freak type of thing. But he reminds me, you talked about Grant Williams. He reminds me a lot of Grant Williams type of style of play. But I think He's a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical. So yeah, I would not be upset if the Nuggets ultimately drafted, Joshua Jefferson. I think he is a guy who could come in and contribute to this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Like I said, I watched this guy and it felt like I was watching a guy who was just built for Nuggets basketball. I mean, high IQ, solid passer. He fits in the flow of an offense really nicely. And again, defense for a guy who's like 6'8, 246, probably come off the bench at the 3. There's a situation I think maybe where you might not even have to re-sign a guy like a Bruce Brown, because then you just slide Spencer Jones into more of a 2-guard role at 6'6". Then you bring in Jefferson at the 3 and then Deron Holmes at the 4. And that's a pretty solid 2 through 4 coming off your bench if you're the Denver Nuggets. I would have very few issues with that situation. And then round 1, pick 30, Isaiah Evans, shooting guard. They have him going to Dallas. 6'6", solid. I mean, 36% from 3, decent. 186 pounds. No. So yeah, not the type of guy the Nuggets are looking for in this draft. But I mean, we've come to the end of this discussion. I think those are our general thoughts on the draft and some of the guys that we think the Nuggets should take. Just to summarize this episode, give us your top 3 prospects in order of your favorite that you would love the Nuggets to draft reasonably to your third favorite in that general order.
And we're just assuming we stay at 26, or are you saying we could move up? I mean, if we're just staying at 26, in order it would be Terrace Reed Jr. He's number 1 guy who I hope falls to us. I just love his game. A guy we didn't talk about, Zuby Ejiofor out of St. John's. He would be another guy who I would really, really consider at that spot. He was the Big East Defensive Player of the Year. He was a senior. He averaged about, I think, 17 and 8, somewhere in there. Definitely a guy who I would strongly consider. He's not going to be a stretch the court, not going to knock down threes, but he's going to play defense for you. So talking about that kind of second team. And then, maybe if I'm looking at a third, you could roll the dice. Obviously, I don't think Morez Johnson Jr. is going to fall to us. So you could roll the dice on one of the guards, even a Joshua Jefferson. I wouldn't be upset with that as well.
Yeah, solid. I think my top 3 in this order, obviously number 1 for me is also Terrace Reed Jr. That's just, I mean, dude, we need to just commit our backup center role to something. And I think at this point, it's clear that needs to be a guy like Terrace Reed. He was just solid physically, offensive rebounding, defensive presence, defensive skills. Number 1 for me for sure. Number 2 for me, I'm going to say Joshua Jefferson is number 2 for me, especially at pick 26, where he's probably going to be available, one might assume. Like I said, I mean, I watched his highlights and I felt like I was watching a guy who would fit really nicely into a Denver Nuggets system. So again, you like the fact that he's played a lot in college, very NBA ready, physically, experientially, what have you. And then number 3, I think I'm going to throw Jaden Quaintance in there. Number 3, again, a guy who's very similar to Reed, a little bit smaller, but I think to me, it just depends on which of those 2 bigs is available at that position, assuming the Nuggets don't want to go with a guy like Joshua Jefferson. But for me, Quaintance is right up there. I do like that defensive presence that he has. And I think it's worth selling out for that at the backup center spot when everything we've tried at the backup center spot over the last decade really hasn't borne a ton of fruit, let's say. So those are my thoughts. Any other closing thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
No, I think we touched on a lot of guys. Look, there's a reason why all these guys are, in the NBA draft, right? They all are good. They all have talent, but you see so many of the guys who are expected, who they get drafted based on talent alone, and then they just never pan out. And so really for the Nuggets, I think this is a really big draft. I know we didn't talk about the second round, but I think there is still some additional talent that they could land in the second round, even maybe even move up in the second round to try and get one of those guys who are kind of, borderline end of the first round, early second round type of guys. because I think that, like I said earlier, the Nuggets are in a win now type of position, and they've got to also be cognizant of, hey, we do have some guys who are getting older, so we need to kind of make sure we're thinking about what we're going to be doing in the future as well. So I don't know. I think that's just my thoughts. I'm excited for Tuesday. I always love the NBA draft. It's a good time, and it doesn't take 5 days like the NFL draft. So that's my favorite part.
Yeah, absolutely. You just kind of get through the draft effectively. So, yeah, I mean, good stuff, man. I don't really have anything else to add. I think it's a very intriguing draft. I think that there's an opportunity for us to get better in certain ways, but I also think it's clear that some of our competitors are going to get better in some ways as well. And so I'm not terribly thrilled with that, but it'll be an offseason that really tests the grit, let's say, of this front office to see what exactly they're willing to do to take advantage of the best remaining years of a top 10 NBA player of all time. And so it'll be very interesting to see what they do, with that being the very focal emphasis of this offseason. So good discussion, man. Very fun talking draft stuff with you. Thank you to everyone who listens to this episode. We're very happy to be back with you. We'll be back with you next week for our free agency preview, and we'll also recap the draft as well, assuming the Nuggets keep their picks and don't do anything too crazy in the next few days. But till then, enjoy the draft. Follow us on social media if you haven't already, not just us individually if you'd like to, but definitely go follow the Nothing But Nugs page. We're trying to be more active on there, be more engaging with you guys. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. So till next week, take care. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you then. Peace out.
Go Nuggets.